Tonight's lead, power and the president. Time and time again, the GOP's proven that they love to play power politics. So now they're getting a dose of their own medicine. President Obama has thrown down the gauntlet on taxes. And while the GOP's stomping its feet at making the wealthy to pay a bit more, he's making his pitch to the people. At a toy factory today, he warned them to play nice.
Joe Biden was in Costco. He wanted to buy some of this stuff. But I told him he had too much work to do. I wasn't going to have him building roller coasters all day long. Now, of course, Santa delivers everywhere. I've been keeping my own naughty and nice list for Washington. So you should keep your eye on who gets some connects this year. There are going to be some members of Congress who get them and some who don't.
What sort of plan do you give the Republican who won't agree with anything? This one, of course. The president is asking for a $1.6 trillion tax increase, $50 billion in economic stimulus, and the power to raise the debt limit without congressional approval. Meanwhile, he'll work to find savings in entitlements. Strong deal, right? Not to the man sitting on the top of the naughty list. Senator Mitch McConnell said that he, quote, burst into laughter at the proposal. You know what's really funny, Senator? The president's got the leverage in this argument. Speaker Boehner knows it.
Do you think that the White House is trying to squeeze you? And if so, will that work?
Listen, most of you know me pretty well. What you see is what you get. And while I may be affable and someone that can work with members of both parties, which I've demonstrated over the 22 years that I've been here, I'm also rather determined to solve our spending problem.
I don't hear an answer to the question. Here's a hint. You are being squeezed. The president has 64 million votes behind him, and he has 36 congressional Republicans distancing themselves from the anti-tax pledge. And oh yeah, the simple matter of fairness. If the GOP doesn't agree to a deal, they'll be responsible for playing the part of Scrooge this holiday.
If Congress does nothing, every family in America will see their income taxes automatically go up on January 1st. Every family, everybody here, you'll see your taxes go up on January 1st. I'm assuming that doesn't sound too good to you. That's sort of like the lump of coal you get for Christmas. That's a Scrooge Christmas.
That's a Scrooge Christmas, all right. But this president is going to do everything he can to stop it.
I've got a bunch of pens ready to sign this bill. I'm ready to sign it. There are no shortage of pens in the White House. And I carry one around for an emergency, just in case. Just waiting for the chance to use it to sign this bill to make sure people's taxes don't go up.
He's got the pen and the power. From the look on Speaker Boehner today, he's getting the message. Joining me now is Chris Hayes, host of Up with Chris Hayes here on MSNBC, and Melissa Harris Perry, host of Melissa Harris Perry here on MSNBC. Thank you both for being here this evening.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Melissa, it does seem that President Obama has shifted his tactics this time around, and is all about using his power.
Yeah, and in this case, we have to remember that nothing has fundamentally changed structurally in terms of the players at this table versus the players who were at the table of the debt ceiling. This is the same lame duck Congress. Right. You know, the new 113th isn't seated yet. So the issue of power in this case is really the power of persuasion, the ability to convey two things. One, that the American people voted for him based on the sets of issues that are now before the country on the fiscal cliff issue. And secondly, he has to be convincing that Republicans will be punished at the ballot box next time if they don't come to a deal.
But, Chris, you know, Speaker Boehner keeps arguing for cuts, but the second time in as many days he declined to name any of the cuts the GOP would make. They seem to be on the defensive. They refuse to give any specifics on what they offer. Any deal. Republicans want entitlement cuts, but offer no specifics. They say they will accept new revenue, but offer no specifics. Say they'll make concessions on tax deductions, offer no specifics. So they seem to really be on the defensive this time.
Well, I mean, if you not only a refresh off an election in which this stuff was intensely litigated, I mean, the center of the debate. We're not talking about subsidiary issues that didn't get enough attention.
Right.
We're talking about the stuff that was the first thing that got said in every debate. The position of raising taxes on the top 2% is incredibly popular. It even polls as a majority among Republicans in some polls. And cutting social insurance, cutting Medicaid, cutting Social Security, or cutting Medicare is not popular. And in fact, much of the election was over each side trying to convince the American people that it was the other side that really wanted to go after Medicare specifically.
Absolutely.
And so now what you have is there's this weird kind of bipartisan consensus. We got to do something about the cost of Medicare, but no one wants to be the first person to come out and be like, we're taking the scissors.
But by giving no specifics, Melissa, are they hoping, is Boehner hoping that the Democrats will come back with a more conservative proposal, or is he wanting them to say something so he can just disagree with whatever it is?
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends a little bit on what we think the president is hoping for at this point. I mean, the fact is the president could go ahead over this fiscal cliff, and at least politically for him, there isn't a lot of cost to it. There's some real cost to American families. There's some real cost to ordinary people, and particularly to the most vulnerable. And so the president, sort of from that position, may certainly be trying to pull us back from it. But politically, there's no reason for him not to go ahead over, because he could, yes, you'll see your taxes increase on January 1st, but you don't have to write a check on January 2nd. So he'll have time to then introduce the Obama tax cuts and basically dare this Republican, the 113th Congress, not to vote for it.
But when he puts out his plan, then you hear, Chris, I was very intrigued by the statement that Charles Krauthammer made on Fox, that the Obama offer is worse than what was offered to General Lee at the end of the Civil War. Listen to this.
It's not just a bad deal. This is really an insulting deal. What Geithner offered, what you showed on the screen, Robert E. Lee was offered easier terms at Appomattox, and he had lost the Civil War. This is almost unheard of. I mean, what do they expect? They obviously expect the Republicans will cave on everything. I think the Republicans ought to simply walk away.
Chris, with Lincoln out, I think he could have used a different analogy.
First of all, Lee was offered extremely generous terms.
Yeah, right. That's actually a historical problem that Lee was offered.
Lee got very generous terms. But look, the funny thing is the end of that statement, which is the end of statements I keep saying. Rush Limbaugh says it, walk away, walk away. But that's exactly it, right?
Yep.
That's why they're boxed into a corner, because if they walk away, then all the taxes go up. And the delicious irony here, I will note, is that when they rammed through the Bush tax cuts, one of the pieces of budgetary gimmickry they did was to have them sunset so that the cost was lower than what would actually be if they were kept permanent. And that can was kicked down the road 2 years ago when we had the deal in that lame duck, and now it is coming back to bite them because they're going to expire and blow up in the Republican Party's face when it was the Republican Party who wanted to put the time limit on them in the first place to get them passed.
And since he brought up General Lee, I'll resist the temptation of saying who Lee was.
Right.
But Lee did lose the Civil War. I mean, they lost the election.
Well, and I think many would argue that the generosity of the terms given to General Lee at the end of the Civil War is precisely why we end up with the system of Jim Crow with a very short Reconstruction and with having to fight the entire battle 100 years later again in the American Civil Rights Movement. So, okay, good. How about we? In fact, I think many would make similar claims about World War I and World War II. If he's trying to make a claim for really vanquishing your enemy, that'd be the best way to do it.
Well, the other part is that they since they've took over the House, they've stopped anything from getting done. Congress is on track to become the least productive Congress since 1947. How much pressure does that put on Boehner to make a deal?
I think it's a really interesting open question for this reason. They have managed to defy the laws of political gravity in that respect for basically the first 4 years of the Obama administration. Their idea was the normal logic of political gravity is basically that we have to go back to our districts and campaign on something. We have to tell them things that we have done. And they have been relatively successful in not obeying that. The question is, does this election change their mind about what their incentives are in terms of compromise or obstruction?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the kind of basic rules of American politics. Congressmen vote yes, right? You don't even need to know what the topic or the bill is. They just tend to move legislation forward. But the very fact that they are a do-nothing Congress may work into the president's favor at this point, because doing nothing is, in certain ways, the dominant strategy in this particular game.
That's why it's so fiendishly clever, right?
Yes.
The way they've set this up is precisely to exploit the biggest weakness of the Republican obstruction, which is that the thing they're best at doing is doing nothing.
Yep.
Well, that the problem is they've defied political gravity. They did not defy election gravity.
No.
They lost. Chris Hayes and Melissa Harris Perry, thanks, and have a great weekend. And be sure to catch up with Chris Hayes. Up with Chris Hayes is the name of the show. Don't just catch up with him, but catch up with Chris Hayes is the name of the show. Saturdays and Sundays from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern, and Melissa Harris Perry Saturdays and Sundays starting at 10 a.m. Coming up, think you know who Ronald Reagan would be siding with in this fairness fight? Think again. Plus, he's back from his on-air meltdown with a new theory. Karl Rove and the Republicans have a reason for failure, and it'll have you laughing like we did in the office today. And Bo Obama takes us on a tour of the White House. You're watching Politics Nation on MSNBC.
Now it's official. Powerball officials said that 2 people had the right number to win the $580 million jackpot. 2 people, yeah. So congratulations to the lucky winners, Mitt and Ann Romney.
Oh, $580 million, just throw it on the pile.
Yeah.